The number one mistake you're making with your ego. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sonia. I'm a fourth generation intuitive, Hay House author and guide. And today I want to talk to you about the most common mistake I see with my clients and in over 15 years of working with people and helping them better connect with their intuition and themselves. And this is a well-intentioned, oftentimes very, very common mistake. And here it is. I'm going to give it to you right off the bat. Making promises to yourself that you do not keep. And this is especially true when it comes to our spiritual routines, our spiritual hygiene, taking care of ourselves. And what happens is when we do not follow through on these promises that we make ourselves, which is even a way that we train our ego and intellect to start to relax, actually trust our spirit, to follow our intuition, to get out of overthinking and into flow. What we're actually doing is telling those human parts of ourselves, our ego, intellect, that they cannot trust us. And if you can't trust yourself, how the heck are you going to trust your spirit? Especially if your spirit or your intuition asks you to do something that feels a little bit radical. Whether that might be moving or taking a job, or even those places of maybe where you get your subtle intuitive guidance, but then you're like, I don't know if I should trust it or not, because your ego intellect's like, I'm not sure if this is a safe. So when we actually start to train our ego and our intellect by making simple promises to ourselves as ways to help to connect to our spirit and actually quiet that place of trying to figure it out. So how I see this again and again, and this happens all the time. You might start to want to reawaken your spirituality, get back into your intuitive self. You want to move with more flow. You read a bunch of books. They give you a bunch of tools. They tell you, you know what you got to do? You got to meditate every day. You got to do yoga every day. You got to chant every day. You got to journal every day. You got to run around the block every day. And let's be real. Our lives are busy. It's super busy. And with that, that means that we don't have a lot of time. Things are constantly vying for our attention, vying for our energy. And when we decide to make these beautiful, idealized, and trust me, I am somebody who is very much an idealist. And I face this all the time when I am in my workday and thinking about what the things I wish that I could accomplish versus what I can actually accomplish. My idealized self will say, you know what? Your spiritual routine looks like waking up, doing 30 minutes of movement, then 30 minutes of chanting, then some breath work. Then on top of it, we're going to do meditation, and I'm going to journal 3 pages. Now, that's a lot of time. And so maybe for the first day, you do it. The second day, you do it. The third day, you start cutting corners. The fourth day, you realize that you're exhausted because now you have to wake up at 5 a.m. before you start work at 9. And it's just not gonna work. So that promise that you make yourself, that you do not keep, one, because the goal, and it's way too lofty and high, becomes a broken promise. And then that little seed becomes a way that we can actually be more critical of ourselves. That ego intellect that loves, because our egos love routine, that little promise that we make ourselves, that we break, becomes actual fodder for ways that we're even harder on ourselves. Now, I want to explain, we have our different parts. We have our ego. Our ego is the part that self-separates out. We need our ego. Ego is part of your identity, your sense of self. It is a way that we can actually use our human self to be of service to the world. You need your ego. If you did not have your ego, you would not be able to differentiate yourself from a speeding bus that's coming down the street. We need it. It's a good thing. You would be only in divine consciousness. So we love our egos, but our ego has a very limited amount of information. And because its job is to self-separate out, is to say, this is me, this is you, this is separate. With that same, if it's not trained and really in a place of where it can trust our deeper self, our spirit, our innate divine consciousness, what it does is it separates out everything. That's where it gets into black and white thinking, all or nothing, gets into overwhelm, overly overwhelmed because it's saying how, I don't know how to keep things separate. Because it's constantly, so, it's like the sniff test. Is this good? Is this safe? Is this good? Let me think about it. So we don't want to do that. We don't want our egos to lead. We want our spirits to lead. And when our ego is in service to our spirit, that is actually when our ego can relax, because it's like your ego is your barking dog. It's your pet, in my family, as my mom always taught me. You train your pet. You don't let your pet poop all over the house, and you sure as heck don't let your pet make decisions in your life. The way that I like to think about it sometimes is, if your ego isn't trained, it's driving your life bus. And when you're driving your life bus, imagine a little chihuahua trying to drive a bus in the movie Speed. It's freaked out. Dogs don't know how to drive buses. Your ego does not know how to drive in life. That's the truth. And we also have our intellect. Our intellect is the part that organizes the world around us. It's linear. It thinks in black and white. It has no access to imagination. And it's critical just by its very nature. And we love our intellect because it helps us organize. It helps us think with critical thinking. It doesn't get caught up in appearance. But if that intellect also isn't trained to connect with your spirit, to be quiet, what it happens is it takes that well-intentioned promise of your 2-hour spiritual practice, because we're moving on up. That becomes a place where it gets even more critical of yourself. And I see this. I had a client not that long ago, and we were talking, and she had dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of overthinking. And she said, in our mentoring, one of the things that I always do before I start a mentoring practice with a client is I say, what are your goals? What are the things that you want? And this isn't a mental faculty. How do you want your life to feel? And so at first she had some business goals and some different things, and then she got quiet. She said, what I really want is to be able to trust my intuition and flow. Great. Let's get into it. And her inner perfectionist, the part that said, okay, you know what we're going to do every single day? We're going to do my little spiritual routine. We're going to do it completely right. And have gathered from all these books and tools and things, and this is how I'm going to have to do it. But in reality, it wasn't actually a place where she was being fed. It wasn't a place where she was actually getting quiet and connecting. It was a very long to-do list that actually caused more stress and strife in her life. And slowly but surely, she abandoned her spiritual practice because, it didn't feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, we're not going to do it. We brush our teeth because after you brush your teeth, you go, that feels good. Getting all that dirt and grime off. And it's the same thing. So I asked her, well, how does this feel? She's like, it's way too complicated. It's so complicated. It's so long, but I have to do it. I should. Really good words that we know when we're in our ego. And I said, how about we simplify it? And what we do is make one tiny promise to yourself that is going to be your promise to yourself. Those are your promise to your little ego intellect, that you will show up every day. And this is a promise from your spirit to these human parts that says, you can count on me. I will take care of you. I will be there to nurture you. I will show up. I have your back. And this is my promise. And this is the way that you can develop trust. And so she thought about it. And she was like, well, I'm going to meditate every day for 20 minutes. And I said, I don't know. That feels like that's a really lofty promise. She has 4 kids. Her life is super busy. She runs her own business. And so I said, okay, well, how about we simplify that promise and you use my favorite tool, one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And every morning before you open your eyes, you promise that you're going to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. This is a really fabulous tool to connect with your spirit. And just take a few deep breaths and anchor into your own vibration. And that's the promise that you make yourself. And she thought about it and she said, you know what? I can do that. I said, okay, great. Let's see how that feels. So as we started to continue to work together, she started to really brought this tool into real play. And what she found was that everything in her started to relax. Her Chiweenie, little barking dog, that's her Chihuahua weenie dog, started to know what was coming. Every morning I have something to look forward to. Every morning I have this routine. Every morning I know one thing that's coming down the pike. Same thing with her intellect, one thing that's coming down the pike. And that ritual of putting one hand on her heart and one hand onto her belly radically transformed all of her energy. And then she started to be able to make new promises to herself. The next promise that she started to make to herself was to drink a glass of water before she had her cup of coffee every day. And that was her promise. And so these two promises started to build and build and build. Next was a few minutes of movement, because the big thing that she said was, I don't have enough time, all these, but now she started to prioritize that time for herself, connecting with her own spirit. It was not complicated. It was not more than 5 minutes. And at that same time, what happened is she actually felt like, I can trust myself. My ego intellect can start to trust my spirit. I can trust my higher self. And then I can start to make decisions that are in alignment with my deeper self, with my values. And from there, I can actually flow more easily in life. And her intuition, which was already working, she stopped having to think about it. She got her intuitive hits and followed them. And her ego intellect in service, they helped her instead of fought against her and said, are you sure you know what you're doing? Oh my God, you got to figure it out. And then the other part of being hard on yourself, like, I should have. So moving out of that paradigm of trying hard, of being exhausted, of all that means, what is one promise you're going to make to yourself? One tiny, itty bitty little promise, and follow through on it. Right now, for example, I am in Paris with my whole family, which is such a wonderful treat. But at the same time, I'm sharing a space, a space that has my sister, her husband, a baby, my mom, me, and I have to make my spiritual routine. I promised myself every morning that I would stretch for 5 minutes, no matter what is going on. And that promise, it puts the foundation for my day, which helps everything in train. And that is my date to myself. That is the promise to me. I can do that. I can do 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a lot. So this is my tool for you. It's the number one mistake, because when we don't follow through on our word, just like if you have a friend who promises the moon and the stars and says we're going to dinner and then cancels all the time and sells you all the different stuff but doesn't follow through, you don't trust them. And rightfully so. And that's the same with our own human parts. If they don't trust you, they're not going to have you really follow what your intuitive real nudges are. So do this one thing. It can be as simple as drinking a glass of water every morning. Don't make it complicated. Don't make it the moon and the stars. Make it as simple as possible, and watch how your life transforms. Watch how you just feel safe, more grounded, happier, better flow, have better relationships, better communication. Seriously, it's a game changer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment. What's the one promise that you're going to keep to yourself? What's your one thing? Is it a glass of water? Is it a hand on your heart? Is it any, and really just think about it and be truthful with yourself of what you can show up to. So I am sending you all my love. If you haven't already, go below, take my spirit type quiz. Let me know what kind of spirit type you are. Get tools and ways to help to better nurture yourself. And if you want to work with me, book a reading. Get clear on your soul purpose, your gifts, blind spots, and always, I love working with you. And if you're really curious about mentoring, book a 15-minute free discovery call and we can see if working together is a good fit. I am sending you all my love. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Bye.